He looks into my eyes intensely. It's as if he's reading my entire past. In milliseconds, his pupil scans every feature of my face. Looking at me, he registers my facial expressions. I know he's observing my haircut. When I answer his question, he pauses at the movement of my lips, as if he masters a secret code that detects whether I'm telling the truth or lying. He notices my hands. They feel like eternal seconds. At that moment, I don't know if what I feel is fear or profound respect. What I do know is that it's one of the best days of my life. Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria, the boss of bosses, the lord, the patron, the chief, the most feared, powerful, and wealthy man in Colombia, has taken notice of me. That's how Jhon Jairo Velásquez describes the way he met El Patron. In a miniseries, we will tell the life story of Popeye based on his books. Stay tuned until the end and don't miss any details about the life of one of the most important lieutenants of the Medellin cartel. Jhon Jairo Velásquez Vázquez was born in Yaramul, Antioquia, a small and cold village about 140 miles from the city of Medellin. It was April 15, 1962. His father was a small rancher and entrepreneur in the region. His mother was a housewife, a saint with solid principles, a believer, and a practitioner of her faith. She always clung to her faith, praying with the rosary every day in the company of her children. One of the things he enjoyed the most at that age was visiting his paternal grandmother because she always offered him sweet and delicious milk. But that pleasure came at a price. To visit her, he had to cross a cemetery. In that same cemetery, the remains of two of my siblings who, according to their mother, were stillborn, rest. One day, his father decided to move to Itagüí, a town just 18 kilometers away from the city of Medellin. There, in Itagüí, the world opened up to him dramatically and frenetically. Happiness arrived without warning or preparation. Children were everywhere, playing, riding bicycles, coming and going from school, and lining up to watch movies. Life was vibrant, and all around, the stores were filled with sweets, and the streets were filled with thousands of cars and motorcycles, bar music, billiard halls, and dance halls. Soon, it was time to go to school. He felt important. His father even gave him pocket money, which allowed him to discover freedom. He could buy all the ice cream he wanted. But happiness never comes without misfortune. The villain, a horrible teacher who intimidated the whole class. In one of his many mischievous activities, he had to clean the classroom. He was doing the task when his heavy mop slipped on the wooden base that held the school emblem, a statue called the Infant Jesus of Prague. The plaster statue fell to the ground, shattering into 1,000 pieces. The teacher cruelly struck him and prophesied his dark future, insisting that he knew what would happen to him someday. She told him that the devil would come for him. Technically, he was a friend of God and, supposedly, as a consequence, he was on his team. He knew many prayers by heart. And those thoughts calmed him, but still, the words of that horrible teacher continued to torture him. In church, he often felt that the saints placed on the side wings of the building, those with a fixed and intrusive gaze, constantly condemned him with their stare. He reached a point where, out of fear, he would hide during the Holy Week processions when they took out the statues and marched through the city. He didn't know why, but at that moment in his life, he came to the conclusion that he was no longer a friend of God, perhaps he was not a friend to anyone. But he knew one thing, it was impossible for God to be on the side of that teacher. As soon as the school year ended, he left the school. And then it happened, the inevitable, he encountered the devil. He looked death in the eyes. A terrible fight broke out between two men with machetes around the corner from his house. The sound of metal against metal echoed in his brain. Blood was everywhere. His heart was racing like crazy. He felt a mixture of fear and pleasure, fear of the future and the pleasure of morbid curiosity. One of the men stumbled and fell to the ground, and there he was murdered by the other, his throat slit. Blood gushed out. Surprisingly, he didn't run, everything happened in slow motion. The blood fascinated and hypnotized him. His senses seemed to sharpen. Its red color was beautiful, vibrant, clean. It was life. It was God. It was the devil. He waited until the victim died and the killer escaped, and then he went out to look at the dead body. He knew he would never fear death again. In that moment, he knew he could walk through the cemetery of his childhood without fear of its ghostly shadows. He was no longer the same. He had undergone a new baptism. He was born again in a new, unimaginable, unsuspected world. From that day on, he unconsciously sought violence. He became rebellious, a fighter. He was combative and aggressive. He wanted to be bad, a true outlaw. He started carrying a small dagger and stole things from stores and from his own home. Nothing mattered anymore. After all, God wouldn't help him, even if he prayed the rosary for every known prayer. He wouldn't help him. Just as his wicked teacher had predicted, he was heading to hell. Time passed until one day he realized that his future lay with the military. He decided that the most important person in Itagüí, a colonel of the National Army, had fallen in battle against the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, FARC, in the nearby mountains. When he died, his body was brought to the city, and his wake took place in his own living room. I was one of the privileged few allowed to enter the residence. In the living room, 4 candles framed an imposing but beautiful brown coffin. It was covered with the tricolor flag of his country, and a saber with a laurel-wreathed officer's hat was placed on it. There he learned that being in the military in this country meant being someone important. He entered the Naval Academy in Barranquilla without any difficulty. In the promotional brochures, the school looked very beautiful, but in reality, the grounds were quite the opposite. There were no signs of large ships or cruisers on the Atlantic anywhere. The school felt like a stifling oven, and he struggled to find something to identify with. Apathetic, he finally requested dismissal, which earned him ridicule from his neighbors and a nickname that has stuck with him ever since. Diana, the daughter of a lumberjack, gave it to him. As soon as she saw him back from the academy, she looked up and said, "Popeye the sailor has returned." He attempted to fight for his military ideal once again and applied to the National Police Academy. He entered as a cadet candidate at the General Santander College. He dreamed of someday receiving the same honors as the colonel of his childhood. However, his happiness there didn't last long. Even with the green uniform that he proudly wore, filled with enthusiasm and innocent illusions of grandeur, a lieutenant named Hernán Dario Gallo revealed the corruption within the institution. The police who defended their regimes often received gifts from the mafia and politicians. This deeply disappointed Popeye, and for that reason, he left the National Police Academy disillusioned. He knew that even the police had a price. Ironically, this knowledge would save his life on numerous occasions. During a skirmish in the Laureles district in Medellin, one of his men died and another was injured, but he emerged unscathed. He received a scratch on his right wrist from one of the stray bullets. He saw it as a whimsical fairy playing with his life, only to receive a scratch from a bullet. When he returned to his district, having failed in his attempts to be good, he faced the cruel judgment of his peers. "You, Popeye, are good for nothing." A man named Nandito, a man with an easygoing lifestyle who worked for Pablo Escobar in administrative tasks, once asked him to accompany him to see a mechanical bull on a ranch owned by the famous drug lord. They arrived at a beautiful estate with a plane decorating the entrance. It was the famous Hacienda Nápoles of Pablo Escobar Gaviria and Gustavo de Jesus Gaviria Riveros. They headed towards the pool area, where they found the mechanical bull. While the engineer inspected the machine, he looked around in awe. He felt dazzled by the wealth and power that permeated the air of that place. He handed tools to Nandito while looking around eagerly, hoping to catch a glimpse of the notorious Pablo Escobar. Armed men, sitting in chairs around the pool, confirmed his presence on the estate. Finally, just as they were leaving, Pablo appeared on the balcony of the second floor. There he was, gazing at the horizon. He was pensive and distracted, as if trying to solve a problem. They left the house satisfied with his brief appearance. They drove the entire way back in silence, pleased and impressed by the imposing and captivating power that one man could inspire. In his district, there were 4 beautiful women. They drove all the boys crazy with their style and the rhythm of their walk. He would have died for one of them in particular. Her name was Angela Maria Morales Velásquez. She was the most beautiful, but considering her humble position, he knew it was impossible even to think of having her. She dated Roberto Streetinger, one of Pablo Escobar's pilots. In the afternoons, driving their luxurious cars, he would look for her while she was still wearing her school uniform. Destiny marked her to one day be his wife and give birth to their only child, Mateo. Over time, he discovered that Angela was a woman without principles. What she had in legs and body, she lacked in decency. She was nothing more than a doll in the service of the mafia. But she was worth it for their little Mateo. His life in the district passed monotonously. He lived somewhere between the innocent madness of youth and my sighs of platonic love for Angela Maria. He quit his job with the engineer and was unemployed for a whole year. One afternoon, he was sitting around the corner from his house with his friends Hugo Franco and Juan Diego Morales. He was in the street having a beer and listening to tango when Angela Maria's brother arrived, disguised as a job opportunity. What he really offered was destiny. The 3 of us were offered jobs as drivers/bodyguards for a beautiful woman. He immediately accepted. In fact, he embraced his new job with seriousness and enthusiasm. His new boss, Elsie Sofia, was Pablo's mistress. As time went by, he became more and more familiar with the organization. His loyalty was so appreciated that one day Pablo Escobar, after ending his relationship with his mistress, asked, "Popeye, do you want to die with me?" He replied with a good dose of optimism, "Boss, you will never die." From that moment on, there would be no more important day in his life. He had entered the world of the mafia. And there, he was reborn. In his district, the news spread like wildfire. Tell us what you think about this great story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and activate the notification bell. Until the next video.